So we're in a series of messages working our way toward Easter. It's called the Lenten season, right? Some of you know that. It starts with Mardi Gras and Fat Tuesday and all that. Then you got Ash Wednesday, and then we have all the Sundays working our way through to Easter, a celebration morning. And we're looking forward to celebrating Easter with you, and I cannot wait. That's just a fantastic morning. It's a big morning for us in the church, and it's the day that we recognize that Jesus is the victor over all things. So I'm looking forward to that day. But as we work our way there, what we decided that we wanted to do was to really highlight some attributes of who God is, that who Jesus is in our lives, and recognize that this Jesus who goes to the cross on Good Friday and rises from the dead on Easter morning, there is a lot to this guy. There is a lot to God in our lives to understand and to know. And so we just decided we were going to highlight some of the attributes. And today we're talking about healing and what healing looks like, because the Bible deals with healing over and over again, especially in the area of Jesus' life. And there's in the Old Testament, there are healings that are happening and healings that are taking place. Job is a classic example of something that's going on in the area of healing and God's interaction and God's activity in our lives when it comes to healing. And I just think that it's an issue that we need to address, because I believe that there are a lot of us who need some healing in our lives. I think a lot of us come on Sunday morning with some brokenness in our lives, and that God knows that Jesus knows it. He knows what's going on in your life. He knows what's going on in your heart. And I think for some of us, there's this issue, there's this thing, it's like, well, if he knew, why doesn't he do something about it, right? Why doesn't he fix this? Why does God allow healing, especially as we come off of the heels of a nation that's struggling with what it feels like to go through a school shooting and the healing of our broken souls and broken hearts. And so what does Jesus say about healing, and what does healing look like in the Bible? And so you saw this passage about these four guys who bring this fifth individual. We don't know his name. We don't know what's up with this guy, but we know that he's paralyzed. We don't know if it's from the neck down. We don't know if it's from the waist down. We don't know the details. Obviously, for the gospel writer Mark, the details were not important. Those details, those issues, those fine issues are not as important. What's important is that there are four friends who decide that they're going to bring their friend before Jesus. And there's something about that. There's something within them that leads them to do this heroic act, right? They pick him up on his mat. I don't know what the mat looks like, but they pick him up on this mat, and they decide that they're going to go see Jesus, because, you see, they're in Capernaum. And they're in a house. Jesus is in a house in Capernaum. And what we know, here's a little bit of the teaching behind this. What we know is that Jesus leaves Galilee, leaves Nazareth, his home, right? Leaves his mom and dad and starts his earthly ministry. And by the time we get to this section, he has already done some pretty amazing things. And it says that he's living in Capernaum. I've been to Capernaum. It's a neat archaeological dig. It's an amazing place to go. You can walk around the streets of what was then the very same streets that Jesus walked on. As a matter of fact, in about a week and a half, I'm going to be there again. I can't wait. There are 18 of us from our church who are doing a tour of the Holy Land, and we leave Monday the 5th, and we get back on the 14th, and one of the places we're going to go is Capernaum. And then you can go there today, and I'm committed to going into the Holy Land about every 3 years, so if you want to go on the next cycle, just think about that. Start saving your pennies, right? So it's 2018, 19, 20, 21, 2021. Think about that. So we're going to go, and you could go to the place that they believe Jesus was residing. They believe he was living in Peter's house in Capernaum. You can go there. They've archaeologically uncovered Peter's house, and they have this place you can go in. It's undercover, and on plexiglass, you walk over top of this area, this space that they believe Jesus lived in when he was living in Capernaum. And so Jesus is back home, and he has done all of these amazing things, and the stories about him have managed to make their way back to this house where he's staying at, because if you remember Israel in your geography class, right, it's not a big country. And so think about it, the amount of places where he travels is pretty much the distance from, let's let's put it in some geographical way that we can figure this out and understand it, right? It's like going from Harrisburg to York, York to Carlisle, Carlisle back to Harrisburg. That would be about the distance. All right? So like Jesus is working in that kind of triangled area, right? From Nazareth over to Capernaum, Capernaum down to Jerusalem, Jerusalem back up to the Galilean region, and that kind of triangle is no bigger than the area we know of here in central Pennsylvania. And so when he does something in one place, the news travels, right? Because it's what news does. It travels, and so people, when he comes back home, people know what he's been up to. And so he goes to the house, and people are like, let's go over and see the rock star, man. He's been doing some amazing things. This Jesus guy, he came from Galilee, from Nazareth. He's over here living along the Mediterranean in Capernaum. And so let's take a look. Let's fill that. And they fill the house. And these 4 guys think, well, he's been doing some healing. Over in chapter 1, it talks about Jesus heals many people. Fevers left them. People got up when they were sick. Demon-possessed people were set free. And now he's back home. And so let's go over. And so the house that he's staying in gets filled up. And it says that there are religious leaders who are right down front, right beside him. They get the front row seats because they think they're important. And so when they show up, everybody okay, clear the front of the row. The religious leaders come in and they sit down. And, they're sitting by this who is now a rabbi. He's a teacher. Right? And so they want to hear the teaching of this guy because they've heard about him too. So everybody wants to see what's going on. And by the time these 4 guys that we hear about today, by the time they bring their friend to Jesus, the house is packed. As a matter of fact, the doorway's blocked, the window areas are blocked, there's people standing outside listening. The inside of the house is just wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder. And they can't get in. They're like, we're done, right? We're done. What are we going to do now? We're finished. We can't bring Jesus to this guy, and this guy can't get to Jesus. And so they think to themselves, I'm thinking that one of them was a roofing guy, right? One of them must have been a roofer. And so he says, you know what? I got a ladder. If we can get up on the roof, we can just kind of undo the roof, and we can let him down. And my first thought is, are you going to fix that when you're done? Like, is that part of the plan? Or are you just you're just winging it here, and you're just going to get this guy down in front of Jesus as much as you possibly can? And so they literally pull apart the roof. And now that's hard for us to imagine because that would be hard for us to do in our culture. But in that culture, it's kind of easy. You just kind of undo pieces, and you can peel back the roof, and you've got this opening. And so they decide they're going to let their friend down right in front of Jesus while he's teaching. Just think about it right here. He just comes right down. He's just right in front of him. So everybody stops for a moment, right? Everybody stops because you see, they have this, there's something about them. There's something going on in their lives. There's something they're thinking, and Jesus sees what's going on. And it actually says that in verse 5, it says, seeing their faith. Right? They believe something about Jesus. Now, some of us might believe this very same thing about Jesus. We're not quite sure. We think that maybe it's a two-sided coin, that on the one side we think this, and on the other side we're not sure of this because of all the stuff that's happened in our lives. But on one side of the coin, we believe what they believe, and that is that Jesus is capable of healing. We believe that, don't we? A lot of us in this room would say, yes, Jesus is capable of healing. Jesus is capable of healing. Jesus can do anything, right? If Jesus can do anything, then Jesus is capable of healing. The problem we have is the other side of the coin that says to us, but he may not. He may not heal. Because, you see, we've been around long enough to know, right? We've been around long enough to lose somebody. We've been around long enough to go through some tragedies or difficulties or hardships or troubled times in our own lives. We know that the one side of the coin is Jesus is capable of healing. The other side of the coin is, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I want to step into that. I don't know if I want to get too far down that road. I don't know if I want to put all of my eggs in that basket, right? I don't know, because I don't want to be disappointed, right? I think it's important for us to see what's going on in this particular setting so that we can understand a little bit better what's going on when it comes to healing in our lives. And so I want to pull this apart just a little bit more and get to what Jesus is really talking about in the healing picture in his life and the way he sees it based on what we're seeing here. Because I think we can take a look at this and we can pull this story apart a little bit, and we can see something a little bit deeper and something a little bit more profound. Because, you see, I think we are looking for some healing in our lives. From time to time, maybe some of you are here this morning and you're like, yeah, all right, this is my sermon. Come on, bring it on, right? Because I could do with some healing, right? Yeah. So, what I didn't know was just how close to home this would hit. I'm getting ready, we do sermon prep weeks ahead so that our media people can work ahead of time and get everything ready. And we do team teaching across all of our campuses, so we have to have messages done weeks ahead of time. And what I didn't know as I was preparing this message is that my brother would call yesterday and say, we're taking Dad to the hospital. Right? Like, okay, what's going on? What's happening? What's up? And my dad has some heart issues. My dad's 83, lives out in Hummelstown area, right? And so he's got a pacemaker defibrillator in. We've gone through a lot of stuff with my dad, and he's my dad, and so he doesn't listen well, doesn't pay attention to his diet like he ought to, and so he probably had a lot more salt intake than he should, so he's got fluid retention going on, and they just need to, get some of that fluid out because he's having some congestive issues, right? And so I called my dad before the service just now, and he's like, why are you calling me? Don't you have a service? I said, that's my dad. He's all right. He's going to be fine. He's already calling me out, so he's going to be, I know, that's how I know he's going to be fine, right? He's already, giving me the devil because he's like, it's 9:20. Don't you have a service to get to soon? You better get going. Why are you calling me? So it hits home for all of us, doesn't it? I say that to tell you I'm not immune to this, and neither are you. None of us are. This hits all of us, and it hits home. And whether you're here this morning and you've had something happen and that's just left you broken, or you're suffering with something chronic, or you've got issues in your life or in a member of your family's life or a friendship or whatever it might be that's just hurting, I think we all see what's here, and we want to hear what Jesus does. And so it says that seeing the faith, Jesus says to the paralyzed man, okay, get up and walk. No, it's not what he says first. I think it's important to see where Jesus goes first so that we can understand where Jesus' heart is at on this. Because what Jesus says first to this man is, your sins are forgiven. You see, because I think Jesus is much more concerned about something much deeper than our physical being. I've lived long enough to know that it seems like Jesus isn't going to rush my healing. Seems like, I can pray about it, but it's not moving any faster, right? It's like I've seen some miracles in my lifetime, but wow, Lord, what are you concerned about? And I think as we look at this passage and this man is lowered down, the first thing Jesus sees is faith and a heart need, right? And I know this is hard to hear, that I think this is challenging for us as believers, but I believe what Jesus says to us is something really incredible, and that is I'm much more concerned about what's going on the inside than what's going on the outside. I'm much more concerned about your character than your comfort. I'm much more concerned about your heart emotionally and spiritually than I am about you physically. And while Jesus knows that one affects the other, that there is this interconnection between our physical being and our emotional being and our spiritual being, what Jesus ultimately says to us is, look, I care deeply about you spiritually and emotionally, even more so than I do physically, because you see, what I know about Scripture is that this world will pass away, and so will this body. And so while I understand that you're physically that what's dominating your life right now is the physical issue, what Jesus says is my utmost concern is, where is your relationship to the Father? What's your relationship for an eternity? Where are you going to be when all this is over? Because you see, this body of mine will eventually decay. Here's why I say that, and I don't say that to be crass. I don't say this to be to diminish any of our pain and any of the pain that's going on in this room right now. And I know some of you, and I know some of you really well, and I know some of us are hurting deeply. But I just want to be sure that you hear where Jesus' focus is. That He's focused on our spiritual life, our souls, and our emotional being. Are you okay? And here's why I know that. I know that today I cannot go to Capernaum and find this guy. He does no longer exist in this world. So Jesus' healing for this guy is earthly, worldly, and temporary. Right? Because I can't go to Capernaum and say, hey, 2,000 years ago, Jesus healed a guy at his house. Is he still around? I mean, we chuckle at that, right? Because it's like, that's just kind of funny, right? But the issue is that something later, after this particular healing, something happened to this guy later on that put him into the grave, right? Which is what's going to happen with all of us. Outside, I mean, last time I checked, this world is 100% guaranteed that it's going to end in death. Outside of Jesus coming back, it's 100% guaranteed for all of us, and it was for this guy. I can't go find this guy today. This healing was temporary, or at least conditional. And so Jesus says, what am I going to do for this guy as he's lowered down in front of me, and as I see the faith of his friends? What am I going to do for this guy that's going to last forever? And Jesus does the thing that only God can do. He heals his soul for an eternity. He says, your sins are forgiven. I mean, that rocks the room, right? That rocks the room, because for every religious believer in that day, they're like, what? Only God can do that. And I think Jesus was saying, that's because that's who I am. What you see in front of you is God in flesh, Emmanuel, God with us. And his first concern for this guy is his soul. Where are you going to be when all of this is over? When all this worldly life is over? Because the things of this world that hurt us can get in the way of a relationship with God. Have you ever been in that moment where you doubted because of the pain? Have you ever been in that place where you're like, does God even hear me? Is he even up there? Does he even care? Right? Because the pain can be so immense, physically, emotionally, spiritually, just so deep. They're like, okay, God, if you can't heal this, then you don't exist. Why would you even let this happen? Have you ever been there? Can we just be honest and that absolutely transparent and say, yeah, we've been there. Yes, I've been there. And so what does Jesus say? My concern foremost in your life is so that you know that I love you and that I care and that I want you eternally with me forever. And so I'm going to take care of the one thing that would separate you from me. And it's not your physical body that separates you from me. It's your soul. Where are you going to be for an eternity? So Jesus cares for the brokenness of this man at the deep part of who he is, and he regrets any sins, any shame in his life. He takes care of all of them. He comes in and says, those are the things that I'm going to care for, that there is no regret, no sin, no shame that Jesus cannot heal us from, that he is going to take care of every aspect of anything that would separate us from the Father for an eternity. Because you see, Jesus' utmost is that I will eventually heal you and you will be perfect. But you're going to have to die to do it. I wonder if Jesus wouldn't look at some of us today and say, are you okay with that? You okay that you're not going to be painless in this world? Is it okay that you're never going to be perfect until you get to heaven? Is you going to be okay with that? I think some of us struggle with that, don't we? Because there are some of you in this room who live with pain every day. I got a chance to talk with a friend of mine yesterday. I have not seen this friend for a long time. And Joe and I were sitting down talking, and Joe and I share something in common, and that is we have a faith in Jesus Christ. And so Joe and I got a chance to talk, and we were catching up on life, and I was telling him about where my kids are at, and he was telling me about his kids and showing me pictures of the wedding of his son Alex, and it was just beautiful, and it was wonderful. And I said, Joe, when you walked up here and sat down, I noticed you were limping. What's going on? Joe and I are about the same age. Two of our kids are right at the same age. And Joe said, I had a blood clot a while back, about 2 years ago, and the blood clot cut off circulation to several of my vital organs and to shut off all the circulation to my pelvis. And so, it was an emergency situation, and I'm in the hospital, and they're trying to figure out how to get rid of this blood clot without it killing me. But in the meantime, I lost my spleen because it shut down, and I had some really difficult issues. And they eventually, because of the issues in my hips and my pelvis, I had to get a hip replacement, and that's what's got me limping. And it's breaking my heart because I know this guy is a guy who is an outdoorsman. He loves to hunt. He loves to fish. And he works for the wildlife industry, teaching wildlife at Penn State, at the Penn State campus up in State College. And he just loves to be outdoors. And this is just wrecking his life. And so I looked at him almost with tears in my eyes. And I said, so Joe, how you doing? And he knew the question I was asking, right? Because the question I wasn't asking was physically how you're doing, because he just told me how he's doing physically. He says, I'm in pain every day. I said, so Joe, how you doing? He said, dude, I'm good. I'm like, really? He's like, oh yeah, Jesus got this. He's got this. He's got this. He's got me. I'm in pain every day, but I know my Savior. And that gets me through. Gets me through every day. You see, I think what Jesus did for this guy was not just heal him physically, because he's going to do that. Those who are in the room are like all upset. They're like, you can't do that. You can't heal him physically or spiritually. How do we know? There's no evidence of spiritual healing, right? And at least not in this moment. He doesn't get up and start preaching and start talking in tongues. And so Jesus says, so you know that the Son of God has the ability to heal spiritually, I'm going to show you physical healing. And so he heals him. This guy swings his legs around off of the mat, puts them on the floor, and he stands up for what may be the first time in his life. And the crowd must have been amazed. And I wonder if they were amazed at the right thing, that before them stood a man who had just been redeemed for all eternity. The physical healing is the thing we often look for. And I wonder if God isn't desiring so much more for us. Something more for us. I wonder if God isn't saying, look, I would love to just heal your heart and heal your soul. The brokenness you feel inside, that's what I'm after. That thing that's on the outside, we live in a fallen world. And this world is broken. But I can fix your heart. And I can make sure that you know that you and I are going to be together forever. That I've got you. And you're going to be with me for an eternity. And this is going to get so much better. That's his promise. I wonder if that's what he's after in your life today. Because I believe that when Jesus starts bringing that kind of healing into our lives, we start changing the world around us. Because I think what Jesus does when he brings healing into your life and mine is he asks for us to go and take that healing into the world and to offer it to other people. How can I bring that healing into somebody else's life if I haven't first experienced it? So, Lord, heal me. Bring some healing into my life. Help me recognize what you've already done, how many great things you've already done, how many wonderful things you've already done. Lord, show me something good through this and show me that my eternity is secure in you. I wonder if there's anybody in the room who feels that today.